I hadn't realized just how clearly my family had placed me in the lineup until my mom said it out loud at dinner. Not with anger, not with emotion, just calmly. Your sister's family always comes first. You're always last. My dad nodded like it was simple arithmetic. My sister smirked into her wine glass. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just said, good to know. Because something broke in that moment. Not my heart, my loyalty. Before I tell you what I did next, take a second to hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. And tell me, have you ever realized you were last in your own family? I'm Mia, and most of my life, I learned my place without anyone ever explicitly explaining it. No speeches. No rules posted on the fridge. Just quiet patterns, ones you only notice after they've shaped you. I grew up in a Denver house that looked ordinary from the outside. Trim lawn, neutral paint, family photos by the front door. But if you stood still inside that house long enough, you could feel the way attention moved, how it rushed toward one person and thinned out before it ever reached me. My sister had a pull I didn't. Conversations leaned toward her. Plans revolved around her schedule. When things went wrong, people scrambled. When things went right, they celebrated loudly. I learned early that my role was different. I was the one who didn't need much. The one who could handle it. The one everyone called strong. Like it was praise, but it often felt like a warning. I wasn't unloved. That's the complicated part. I was loved in theory, through reassurances, through phrases like, "You'll be fine, you're so independent." Love that sounded generous but carried an unspoken rule. Don't ask for more. Don't take up space. Don't need us the way she does. I noticed it in small ways. Birthday mornings when my cake was a quick stop at the grocery store, while hers had been planned weeks in advance. Family trips where my suitcase stayed in the closet because I was better off saving for school. Graduation days where I took photos for everyone else, standing off to the side holding jackets, watching milestones happen without me in the frame. When I left for community college, no one cried at the airport. There wasn't even an airport hug, just a quick squeeze in the driveway and a reminder to call when I arrived. I paid my own way, worked extra shifts, learned to stretch time and money because I had to. And every success quietly confirmed what my parents already believed. See? She's fine. She doesn't need us. Years later, when I moved to Seattle for work, the pattern stayed the same. Phone calls were short. Updates on my life were acknowledged, then redirected. How's work? That's good. Did you hear what your sister's dealing with right now? I became fluent in listening in, offering support, and staying calm while my own life unfolded quietly off to the side. By the time of that dinner, the one where my mom finally spoke the words out loud, I already knew where I stood. What shocked me wasn't the ranking. It was how comfortable they were saying it. As if it had always been obvious. As if I had agreed. And maybe in some quiet way I had. After that dinner, nothing changed outwardly. And that was the point. My parents didn't call to check in. My sister didn't apologize. Life went on smoothly, uninterrupted, as if the quiet truth hadn't been spoken aloud. But something inside me had shifted. Requests kept coming just like before. A text from my mom asking if I could watch the kids for a few hours. A casual mention of bills piling up, said as lightly as a weather update. My sister forwarding a message about a payment that accidentally bounced, followed by a laughing emoji. No one asked outright. They never had to. The assumption alone was enough. I caught myself noticing how automatic my old reactions had been. Of course, no problem. I'll figure it out. This time, I didn't respond immediately. At first, it felt off, like I was breaking some invisible rule. My phone would light up, and I'd feel that familiar tug in my chest, the reflex to smooth things over before they spiraled. But I let it sit on the counter. I finished my coffee. I went to work. I lived my day. And nothing blew up. That realization shook me. The world didn't crumble because I hadn't jumped in right away. No emergencies, no catastrophes, just silence. Later came a second message, then a third, sharper one. Are you okay? You've been quiet. I stayed quiet because I was paying attention. And I began looking at my own life with the same precision I applied to my work, my money, my schedule, my energy. I realized how much of it had quietly gone to everyone else. Money that drifted away in small, steady amounts. Time I kept flexible just in case. Plans I never fully committed to because someone might need me. So I started drawing boundaries, not dramatically, no announcements, just practically. I moved money into accounts that were mine alone. I removed shared access. I stopped covering small payments that had never been discussed, only expected. When my sister asked if I could spot her temporarily, I answered simply, I can't. No explanation. No apology. The reaction was immediate. My mom called, her voice tight with a concern that felt more like confusion. Is everything okay? You seem distant. I told her the truth. I'm just busy. She paused as if waiting for me to continue. When I didn't, she filled the silence herself. You know your sister's under a lot of pressure right now. I did know. I had always known. What I was learning was that knowing didn't make it my responsibility. That was the turning point. Not a fight. Not a dramatic declaration. Just the moment I realized that being the strong one had become everyone else's convenient excuse to stop carrying their weight. I didn't know how soon they'd test that boundary, but I was about to find out. The call came on a weekday afternoon, just as I was wrapping up a meeting. I could hear it before a word was spoken. The edge in my mom's voice, tight and rushed, the sound of someone trying to hold it together on shaky ground. We need to talk. Can you come by this weekend? She didn't explain. She didn't have to. By then I understood the language. Urgency without details always meant something had gone wrong, something expensive. When I arrived in Denver, the house felt heavier than I remembered. The air was stale. The living room table was buried under piles of envelopes and scattered papers, bills, notices, printouts that seemed official enough to intimidate. My sister sat stiffly on the couch, arms crossed, eyes glued to the floor. My dad avoided my gaze completely. No one asked how I was. No one ever does in moments like that. My mom started talking fast, words tripping over each other. A business decision that hadn't worked out, payments delayed, a few contracts signed with too much optimism and too little margin for error. She kept repeating temporary, as if saying it enough might make it true. I listened without interrupting, hands folded neatly in my lap, the way I always had. Then came the pause, the collective inhale, the moment they all looked at me. Well, my dad said, finally clearing his throat, you're in a stable place. You don't have kids. You can handle this better than most. There it was. The assumption. The expectation wrapped up in logic. They never said the words outright, but they didn't need to. They expected me to fill the gap, to smooth over the crisis, to make the numbers line up the way I always had. My sister looked up at me, fear flashing across her face for a moment before it was replaced by something else. Relief, as if the answer had just walked in. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I asked a question. What happens if I don't? The room fell silent. Too silent. My mom's expression tightened with hurt. My dad looked puzzled. My sister's face turned panicked. It was as though I had spoken a language they couldn't understand. Not helping had never been part of their expectations. I need time, I said calmly. Time to make sense of everything. They nodded too quickly, eager, certain. They assumed I just needed time to figure out how much I could give, not whether I would give at all. That night in my old bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, feeling something settle inside me. A quiet resolve, born not from anger but from clarity. The next morning I made 2 appointments. One with my therapist, one with a legal advisor. If I was going to step into this mess, it wouldn't be as the family's safety net. It would be on my terms. When I returned the following weekend, I didn't come with answers. I came with clarity. The house looked unchanged, but the energy inside was different, tense, desperate. The kind of quiet that hangs over people waiting to be rescued. Papers were still scattered across the table, now somewhat organized into stacks, like someone had tried to impose order on chaos. Bills here, payments there, a few contracts clipped together, corners creased from nervous handling. My parents were already seated. My sister was beside them, her husband lingering by the doorway, uncertain if he was welcome in the room where the damage had been assessed. No one smiled when I walked in. No one offered coffee. My mom broke the silence first. We're really glad you came, she said, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her voice had that brittle softness I knew so well. The tone she used when she needed something but didn't want to ask outright. I sat down slowly, setting my bag at my feet. Let's talk, I said. My dad cleared his throat and began reciting the explanation I had already heard. The downturn, the delays, the bad timing. He spoke like a man presenting a case he'd rehearsed all week, hoping confidence might mask responsibility. My sister nodded along, eyes glossy, occasionally adding details about stress or the kids or how none of this was supposed to happen. Eventually, the words ran out. That's when my mom leaned forward. "We just need help getting through this part," she said. "Once things stabilize." "How much?" I asked. She blinked. My dad paused. My sister drew in a sharp breath and answered for them. She stated the amount slowly, her voice weighted, as if saying it carefully might somehow make it feel smaller. After a beat, I asked, "So what's the plan?" My dad frowned. "What do you mean?" I replied calmly. "What's changing so this doesn't happen again?" The question didn't land the way I expected. My mom's face tightened. "Mia, this isn't the moment to question us." I nodded, unhurried. "Then it's not the moment for me to write a check either." The air in the room shifted. My sister straightened in her seat. "We're family," she said, her voice lifting just enough to carry feeling without turning accusatory. "This isn't about plans. It's about helping." "Helping who?" I asked. She stared at me like the answer should have been obvious. "Us." I looked around the room. "And who's helping me?" Silence followed. My dad leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're in a different situation," he said. "You don't have the same responsibilities. You're single. You're stable. You can afford to step in." There it was, the reasoning I'd heard my whole life. The equation that always ended with me paying the price. "I can afford to step in," I said carefully, "because I've spent years building my life as if no one would be there to catch me if I fell." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't realize you felt that way." I met her stare. "You did. You just didn't think it mattered." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't confusion, it was unease. I reached into my bag and took out a folder, placing it on the table between us. The motion was slow, intentional. Every gaze followed it. "This is what I'm willing to do," I said. "And this is how." My dad opened the folder first, his brow furrowing as he read the first page, then the next. My mom leaned in over his shoulder. My sister stretched forward, the color draining from her face. "This is a loan," my dad said bluntly. "Yes," I answered, "with clear terms." My sister shook her head. "Why are there conditions?" "Because this isn't an emergency handout," I said. "It's structured support." My mom's voice wavered. "You don't trust us." "I trust patterns," I replied softly. "And this one has existed my entire life." The conditions weren't harsh. They weren't meant to punish. They were practical. Assets had to be sold before any money was given. All spending had to be recorded. No new financial obligations without proof they could be sustained. Family therapy not suggested but required. And a written agreement stating that my name, my credit, and my future would never again be treated as a safety net. My dad slid the folder away. "This is cold," he said. "This is how banks treat people." I nodded. "Then treat me like a bank. Because when you needed emotional support, I was family. When you needed money, I was infrastructure." My sister's eyes filled with tears. "So now you're punishing us." I shook my head. "I'm ending the punishment of me." She looked at our parents, then back at me. "If you don't help us, we lose everything." I held her gaze. "If I help without boundaries, I lose everything I've built." The words stayed between us, heavy and impossible to deny. My mom reached for my hand, then paused, as if unsure she was still allowed. "We never meant to make you feel like you came last." I gently pulled my hand away. "But you did. And you spoke it aloud. No one contradicted you." My dad stared at the documents, jaw clenched. "So this is it," he muttered. "Sign or sink." I shook my head. "No," I said. "This is grow or repeat." Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Minutes ticked by. My sister dabbed at her eyes, her husband pacing behind her nervously. My parents whispered to one another, low and hurried. For the first time ever, I didn't feel the weight of silence. I wasn't offering answers or softening truths. I just waited. Finally, my dad looked up. "We need time," he said. I nodded. "You have 24 hours. My sister's eyes widened. "That's it?" she asked. "Yes, that's it," I said, standing. Tomorrow I'll return. Either we move forward with this, or we don't move forward at all. As I stepped toward the door, my mom's voice stopped me. If we say no, she whispered, voice breaking. Are you walking away? I paused, hand on the doorknob. I'm not walking away from you, I said. I'm walking toward myself. The next day when I came back, the papers were signed. No speeches, no excuses cloaked in apologies, just shaky signatures and weary faces. The relief in the room was tangible, but so was the sense of loss. Something had changed irreversibly. As I packed my things, my sister looked at me in a way she never had before. Not with judgment, not with expectation, but with uncertainty. And for the first time, that wasn't my burden to fix. The consequences didn't hit all at once. They came quietly, step by step, each heavier than the last. The first shifts were practical. Assets were listed, subscriptions canceled, expenses tracked rather than ignored. The numbers ceased being abstract, they became boundaries. My parents scaled back their expectations before scaling back anything else. And just that alone changed the tone of every conversation. Family therapy began a few weeks later, awkward and tense. My dad spoke in careful, measured sentences, afraid of misstepping. My mom cried more than she spoke. My sister sat rigid, arms crossed, as though accountability was a language foreign to her. I listened more than I spoke, not because I had nothing to say, but because I no longer needed to justify my reality. The truth had already been written, signed, and agreed upon. Over time, something unexpected occurred. The panic began to fade. The pressure began to ease, no longer mine alone to bear. Everyone started carrying their own load. My sister discovered how to tolerate discomfort instead of passing it off. My parents stopped saying things like, "We'll figure it out," when what they truly meant was, "You will." The relationship didn't mend with any dramatic gestures. There were no cinematic moments, no overnight transformations, but there was space. Space where guilt had once lingered. Space where obligation had weighed heavily on my chest. Back in Seattle, my life felt steadier, lighter. I concentrated on my work. I slept more soundly. I stopped tensing every time my phone buzzed. When my mom called, it was to check on me, not to assign me tasks. When my sister sent a message, it didn't come attached to a request. The biggest change, though, wasn't theirs. It was mine. I no longer carried the burden of pretending everything was fine. I didn't rush to prove my worth by solving problems that weren't mine. I learned that boundaries don't diminish love. They define the space where it can exist without harming you. One evening, sitting quietly in my apartment, a simple yet profound realization hit me. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. And that changed everything. For so long, I believed being last in my family meant I had to try harder, give more, and stay silent. I was wrong. Being last was never something to compete over. It was a signal to step out of the line entirely and create a life where my worth didn't hinge on sacrifice. If this story resonates, even uncomfortably so, know that you are not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if stories like this give you a bit of relief, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.